Hey, welcome in, welcome in. So I'm just going to be using this Nagaroth Knight to give the model an all-over general base coat. We're just going to be spraying, making sure we get it into all of the shadows. And then yeah, just a general all-over base coat. I'm just going to be using this Screamer Pink to go over as armour parts. I'm just specifically spraying this in areas where I'm going to be just brightening up the armour and sort of choosing the light source, and also just spraying where I think it looks cool. But yeah, we're doing this from a zenithal perspective, so we're making sure we're leaving all of the darker colour in all the shadows. Yeah, just giving you a quick look what he looks like with the different layers on. As you can see, still plenty of purple in the shadows. I'll just be using all of these colours for his armour. We're going to be brushing it all on. And we're going to be doing this with like really thin down paint, and the aim is to get some texture onto the model. So we're just building up these different textures whilst also layering up to the brighter red. So yeah, it's nice to have all of the colours on the wet palette, and then that way if you go too far off one colour you can always go back, and yeah, it just gives you a bit more freedom for experimenting with how bright you want to go. And if at any point you make a mistake, you can always just go back to the wet palette and choose a different colour. Yeah, again, we're just building up textures, and where the paint's thin, we're not adding physical texture to the model, we're just giving the impression of texture. So yeah, plenty of stippling and like brush strokes, and yeah, just gradually building up to the brighter reds. So again, you start off with like the darkest colour, and that occupies the most part of the panel, and then as you go up through the colours, you just try and stay within the borders of that, and yeah, we're just gradually covering less and less as we go higher in colour. So yeah, I usually use an airbrush for all of these steps, but I thought just to keep it fun and interesting, we'll do it all with a paintbrush. And yeah, just so you can see what it's like, yeah, just building up textures with the paintbrush. So yeah, it definitely takes a lot longer to build up the colours with a paintbrush, but I do find it lots of fun to use the 00 and just build up the textures slowly. So yeah, it's a nice skill to have. It's nice to use the airbrush, but it's also nice to be confident with the normal hand brush as well. So yeah, and here he is with all the armour panels done. So yeah, looking pretty cool. Well, happy with how he's looking so far. We'll just be going over all of the trim with this Balthazar Gold. Again, these models are quite nice to paint. The trim's like quite thick, so yeah, it's not as stressful as you might think. But yeah, there's plenty of trim on these guys, so yeah, just take your time and enjoy yourself the best you can. And just be doing the same thing with this lead belcher, but just going over all of the silver pieces. I just thought it's worth mentioning that you might want to do the black step before the silver part, just because there is some cloth on the model where the chains sort of lay over the top of them, so you are at risk of accidentally going over your silver parts with the black and then having to go back over it again. So it might be worth doing the black stage before this. But yeah, already just looking really cool. I'm well happy with how he looks so far. I'll just be going over all the skulls with this Ushanti bone. And we'll just be going over all the black parts of this matte black. So yeah, he's just got some black cloth and then like his tubes and pipes and stuff. But yeah, this is like what I was talking about earlier, where you might have wanted to do the black step first just so you didn't have to dodge around the silver parts that you've done, but you just take your time in that, you should be fine. And just be going over all of the trim with this Agrax Earthshade, just adding some depth back into it. And sometimes just using the metallic paints can leave the surface looking a bit flat, so yeah, it's nice just to add some depth back in. And just be doing the same thing with this Nuln Oil, but over all of the silver parts. And then the same thing again with the skeleton horde, but over all of the skulls. And these are the colours I'll be using for a skin tone. And we're going to go for a more of a Evil Dead 3 sort of possessed skin. So still like a white skin tone, but we're going to have a lot more sort of purples and stuff, and also we're going to be building up the textures similar to what I did with like the Exalted 8-bound, but we're going to leave it so it's a bit more, well, a lot more rougher looking and patchy, just so it's a bit more like possessed. And yeah, it just helps differentiate them against the Exalted 8-bound. Sometimes it's nice to sort of make up your own story for why you do things. So I feel like the Exalted 8-bound are exalted because they're a lot stronger and they've like passed the test easier, so they retained a lot more of their human qualities. Whereas the 8-bound have like made up in my head that they're struggling with the test and they're becoming more possessed and less human. They don't know that they'll never make it as Exalted Eightbound, but they're still trying, and yeah, I'm sort of trying to portray that by making them look more sort of possessed flesh. So when I come to do the eyes and stuff later, they won't be pigmented like I did with the Exalted Eightbound. I'm going to just do the demon eyes. Again, sort of loosely based off of Evil Dead 3. I just really love the way that all the demons and like monsters and stuff look in that film. You've got to love Sam Raimi. I'm sure he uses the same sort of effects in Drag Me to Hell in the previous Evil Dead films. But yeah, I was just watching that one recently and yeah, it got me inspired. So yeah, I'm just sort of making up some nice gradients, starting off with the darkest and like wet blending between the colours. And yeah, we're just making some nice gradients so when we come to do our textures and stuff later, we can use this as like a roadmap for where to put the highlights and stuff. So yeah, I'm basically concentrating on the first 3 colours. So yeah, they're just the first 3 darker ones, building the gradients up for that, and then the 2 sort of lighter ones towards the end. We'll be doing sort of picking smaller areas and adding brush strokes and texture to the model. But yeah, I definitely recommend to anyone that's a bit frightened or hasn't had a go at wet blending before. My advice would be just to, thin your paints and yeah, try and be quick. And yeah, just be brave, just put on like a dark colour and then quickly go to a higher colour and then just smush it in. And as you can see, like the transition between them and the gradient that builds is really nice. And you can usually, we give it say 3 passes just to build up the gradients and colours to make them nice and solid. But yeah, it's looking really cool so far. A good starting point for where I'm going to be going for the next 2 colours. We're building up the highlights and texture. But yeah, you can see there's some nice gradients and transitions on there for us to work with. And then here I go with the next 2 colours, and as you can see, it looks like I'm being quite rough, but I'm actually like sort of just gently hitting the surface with the very tip of the brush. And yeah, we're just creating like muscle strands and texture. Yeah, we need them to look rugged and like weather worn and battle beaten. Yeah, where you can see where I use really thin paint, it just takes a few passes for the layers to build up and the opacity to build up. And yeah, just making sure we've got a nice smooth brush. Just giving it a good rinse and taking any like excess dried up bits off the end. Because yeah, it's important to have a nice sharp tip when you're doing this. Yeah, I love painting like this. I love how like nice and smooth the paint is when it goes on, but where I've left lots of the brush strokes and some areas I don't build up the opacity as much, so the paint underneath like burns through and you get like these patchy bits. It looks like super worn and just battered, which is really nice. And so it like definitely suits these sorts of models. But yeah, I really enjoyed painting these models. The Exalted 8-bound ones as well I did without the armor tops on, so you had a lot more flesh to work with. But yeah, I'd definitely rate these models. They're definitely like really fun to paint. And yeah, I just thought I'd show you a bit of me doing the face, just so you can see I'm just like gradually building up the highlights and layers on his face. We're just going in with the most highest colour now. Just going back over all of the previous textures and brush strokes and trying to keep within the areas that we've already made. But yeah, just be patient. We've got all of the colours on the wet palette as well, so if you go wrong or you do something that you're not keen on, you can always go back to the previous colour and then just start re-highlighting it back up again. And yeah, just like what I was saying before about building up your normal sort of hand brush skill, just makes it less stressful when you've gotten used to using the airbrush and then you need to go in with the paintbrush and you're frightened of making a mistake because you're like, oh no, I'm gonna have to go back in with the airbrush again and start again. Whereas if you build up your skill with the actual paintbrush, yeah, it's like a lot less frightening, and yeah, it's a lot nicer sort of relaxing way to paint, knowing that you can make mistakes. And yeah, you've got the colours on your wet palette anyway, so yeah, it's fine. It's good to build up your confidence and skill with the airbrush and just normal paintbrush. Yeah, absolutely loving how his skin's looking so far. Looking super cool. It's very similar to the native European skin tone I gave the Exalted 8-bound. And then this one where I've got a lot more of the sort of purples and sort of reddy colours sort of bleeding through in the textures. He's definitely looking like really possessed. So yeah, I'm well happy. Definitely getting that Evil Dead vibe from him. So yeah, just what I was going for, so I'm well pleased. Yeah, I thought I'd just leave a lot more footage of me doing the skinning. Just I feel like it's an area that people are maybe not afraid of, but I don't know, sort of struggle or try and avoid. And yeah, I'm just sort of trying to give you the best chance you can to see what I'm doing, so you can replicate the same thing at home. and also just so you can see like a more of a realistic perspective of how long it takes the paint just with the paintbrush, because I think sometimes you can see some artists, they do some like sick looking skin and they sort of fast forward through the footage and it looks like it takes like, I don't know, 5 minutes. In reality it takes a lot longer. Yeah, I'm just going to go in with this Ushanti bone now, or just any off-white colour would do. And I'm just going to do his eyes with it. Again, we're just going for that Evil Dead vibe, that sort of just possessed look. Yeah, looking cool already. And we're just gonna like sink his eye sockets in a bit more, just so he looks even more just possessed with this Carver Crimson. So we're just aiming this into like around his eyes and still letting the we're not covering up the Ushanti bone, we're letting that like come through. But yeah, we're just filling up the sort of the eye socket areas with this Carver Crimson, just to really get that possessed look. So yeah, looking super cool, well pleased with him. I'll just be using these colours for the helmet on his backpack. We're doing the ultramarine. I didn't realise as well, but I just picked up like a different model, just where he's got like two of the same swords in his hands, where I've just been working on them all at the same time. We just picked this one up so you get a bonus ultramarine helmet on this one. So yeah, we're just using the darkest blue, leaving the purple in the shadows, and then yeah, using the brightest blue to sort of highlight it and add a bit of texture to it. And we'll just be going over all of the trim, and we're just hitting all of the edges, just adding a bit more texture and shine and depth back in. And yeah, just making sure we give it some pop and doing the same thing with the silver. Again, just adding some shine and texture into it, give it some scratches. And I'll just be highlighting all of the black with this Stegodon scale. I'd usually use Incubi Darkness, but thought I'd try doing it a bit brighter and then dull it back down with the Norn oil. So yeah, just to give it a little bit of a highlight. Yeah, that brings us to near the end of the video. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Like, comment, subscribe, share.